Hello everybody, welcome back. My name is Whiskers Fox and this is another epic fantasy video. Today we are going over the all-important task of covering my tier list that I released yesterday. You can check out that video on my channel in the epic fantasy playlist, and it's titled the 1.12.0 update video. So if you want to check that out, the back half of that video I discuss my tier list, and in this video I'm going to go over the details of my tier list and why I placed people where they are. So essentially this is a all SSRs ranked video as well as a tier list release video. So let's go ahead and jump into it and check out these heroes and see what we got. Alrighty, so here we are with my tier list up. So we're gonna just I'm gonna show this first so that you guys kind of have an idea of what my tier list is. There's a link to it down in the description as well if you guys want to have it open while we're going over the heroes. I'm gonna keep the tier list off the screen while we're going over the heroes so we're able to see everybody in full splendor and see their kits well and all of that. So take a look at the tier list. This is how it goes. Keep in mind that many of the heroes are usable and that the tier list is subjective. There's definitely certain people on here that I could even myself easily move up or down a tier, typically up a tier, but you know, you kind of have to pick and separate who's the best and who's not as good, and this is kind of where we ended up. So hopefully I can give you guys some explanations about that and why I think people belong where they do. So let's take a look at the heroes now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in the order of the tier list and start with the SS's and move my way down. So the first SS that we have is Dyke here. She is a supporter dark hero, and she's pretty much here for this move here. The all allies increase damage and increase crit rate and provides a shield. So she's helping you get more damage out and she's keeping you alive. And then she puts invincibility on herself, which is always nice. I think that she's the only one in the game that does increase crit. There might be like an R or something that does it, but probably not AoE. So that's a pretty unique skill. And then she also has an instant HP recovery right here on her A2, which is nice. And both of these are based on her magic, so you can try and build her out for a little bit of damage if you want, and you might be able to get a little bit of damage out of her, but it's probably not too worth it. For damage, but either way you want to build her magic to get these heals and this shield up a little bit. And then her A1 has a 75% chance to sleep, and this has sleep retention, so it won't wake them up from sleep, which is kind of neat. So that's the first one, that's Dyke. Second, we have Gland right next to her. I really like Gland. I think he's a really cool looking character in terms of the design. Really neat. Honestly, the character design on a lot of these units are pretty cool. So Gland is best known for his A3 as well, where he removes all weakening effects, provides weakening immunity and recovery for 2 turns on every ally. He also has a self-revive after 5 turns, which is pretty cool. It will keep him, you know, get him back in the fight after he dies. And then he also has an AoE increased defense, which is nice. So he's just a straight up support unit. He's very good for helping keep your team alive, and then he's got some self-heal on his A1 as well, which is only a 75% chance because it's based on him landing that mark. But he's very good as well. One of the best healers probably in the game. I don't think that he doesn't do a lot of healing. I mean, I guess it's not even the right thing to say. He's not one of the best healers in the game. He's just one of the best support units because he has this remove all W effects and the immunity and some healing. He doesn't do a lot of healing, but he is very good for removing all weakening effects and doing immunity for 2 turns. Alright, next we have Ocasio. Blind? Where is she? There we go. So Ocasio is another support unit. She is known for her A2, and she's particularly very good in the arena, but she's also very good in PvE but she requires a little bit of speed tuning if you want to get her working specifically with your team somehow. She'll work good either way, but you can speed tune her to do like specific things within your team depending on how you want to use her. But her A2 increases the attack speed of your whole team and fills their action gauge 100%, so essentially a full turn. And then she increases her own defense and heals herself a little bit. So she's definitely known for that. But she also puts out bombs on her A3 AoE, which gives her some good like continuous damage over time, which is pretty nice. Bombs actually do a pretty good amount of damage, so this is nice. And then the continuous damage on her A1 is relatively useless unless you're fighting a boss, and then in which case it's always nice to have that continuous damage up on a boss. So she's pretty much just a speed unit. She's best known for her increasing speed and increasing action gauge 100%. Alright, next in the SSs we have Hera. Hera was my first pick for SSRs, and her main thing is her A2 as well. For an AoE damage hit, she's magic based. She doesn't do a lot of like utility. She's pretty much just does damage. That's her main job, and she does it pretty damn good. So she's got this AoE hit that increases her damage for 2 turns. Typically she follows it up with her A3, and this does quite a bit of damage. And if it kills someone, she gets a full another turn, which is nice. And then her A1 is kind of nothing special, just some extra damage on beneficial effects. So she's pretty much just a straight up damage dealer. She does it pretty well with an AoE hit. And next is somebody that I don't have, but I actually picked on my alt, and I'm really looking forward to trying her out. But I do think that she belongs up in the SS tier, and that's Gwen. And the primary reason I have her up there is because she does 2 roles in one. So there's multiple heroes like Kurt that do extra damage as the enemy's HP gets lower, but Kurt is only single target, which is fine. Like the single targets actually do put out a lot of damage, but having an AoE hit is nice. So the nice thing about Gwen is that she has an AoE hit like Hera, except it's physical damage based. It doesn't do any extra damage in any way, shape, or form, but it increases her attack speed, which is nice. But then you can see her A1 and her A2 do extra damage based on the target's lost HP. So these are single targets that, and she also increases her action gauge when their HP is below 50%. So she essentially is kind of a mix between Hera with AoE and Kurt with extra damage at lower HPs. But then she's also just increasing her action gauge when they're weak, which obviously helps her get around to turns faster. So I think that she can be really good. I'm really looking forward to building her out on my alt, and I'm sure I'll do a guide on her at some point in the future. And the last for the SS tier is Grace. And it's funny because she was a very bad hero. Previous to this, she was not very good. But they added this stun to her AoE hit, which is absolutely busted. It's very, very good. So she has the AoE 100% stun now, which is very helpful. She also has a 70% increased action gauge here that books all the way up to a 100% when you put skills into it. And then she increases her action gauge even more here. So essentially she just gets around to her turns really fast. I think that she's very, very good, especially on a speed team where you can get her stuns going around a lot. So definitely keep an eye out for her for your tanks. She's very good. All right, now we're moving on to the S pluses. Keep in mind with the S pluses, pretty much every single one of these could have made the SS cut, in my opinion. But there was just something about them that I thought somebody in the SSR class can do it a little bit better. All right, so we're gonna go over that. The first one is Kurt. And my explanation of Gwen should actually help make this make a little more sense, right? He's good. He does good single target damage, but because he doesn't have an AoE hit, I felt like he lacked just a little bit as a dealer. It's nice, he does good damage and everything, but it's always nice to have that option of an AoE hit. And the fact that Gwen has both the stuff he does and an AoE hit made her just a little bit better. So he got dropped down a tier. But Kurt does really good. He's pretty much just the single target extra damage on HP loss. He also has an 80% chance to stun, which can come in clutch sometimes. He increases his own attack speed. Next we have Libra. Libra is 100% an SS tier in arena. She's very, very good in the arena. She can hold out. I've lost fights against just solo Libras before. Why can I not find her? Goodness, I'm having trouble finding characters today. All right. Libra is pretty cool. She does AoE decrease attack speed, which is nice, and absorb action gauge 100%, so she gets herself going around fast. And then she also gets more... Here it is. Increase action gauge 20% when you attack a target with a weaken effect. So pretty much every time she attacks, like with her A1, as long as they have a single weaken effect, she's going to get more turn meter back. So she's nice. She's kind of a speed control unit. So she goes fast herself. She decreases the attack speed of the enemy. And then she also... she actually can do a little bit of damage too. You don't really have to build her for it either, because she does damage based on enemy max HP, some of her damage. And that consistent damage from the enemy max HP will slowly like whittle away people over time, which is pretty nice. The primary reason I have her in the S tier, or the S plus, as opposed to the SS's, is because I think that she is better in Arena. And she's not as good in PvE, but she's still very good in PvE. But I think that because Arena is her place to shine, I didn't feel like it was reasonable to include her in the SS tier, because there is a place that she is better. So she dropped down to an S plus, but she's still very good. Excuse me. All right, next is Michael. I really like Michael a lot. I would consider him to be an off tank, which means that he doesn't have threat. This is kind of just something that I'm learning about in this game, that there's like different types of tanks, and it really defines how they're used, right? So he's good. He has an AoE that heals himself and decreases their action gauge. I would say he's probably like Libra, where he's quite a bit better in the Arena because he can keep himself alive. The only reason I have him down in S plus tier is because he doesn't have 3-turn threat. He does do taunt on his A1, but he's got 2 other skills that he's going to end up using. Actually, does he just have the 1 skill? Okay, so he just has the 2 skills. His AoE and his single target. I think that he is very good, but I think he, like Libra, I think he shines a little bit more in the Arena. So I dropped him down, and he doesn't have threat on him, which I think threat is slightly better than taunt. But having only 2 skills, his taunt probably gets up quite often, right? Because you have to wait for this to get cooled down. And he heals himself too with he puts blood sucking on himself and heals. But he's very good. He'll stay alive for a while, but sometimes you'll find that the enemies won't be targeting him because he doesn't put threat up on himself. So he's very good for survivability, but as a primary tank, sometimes he'll get avoided by the enemies. All right, next is Elizabeth. Elizabeth is another one, just like Libra and Michael, that's probably a little bit better in the Arena, particularly now that Grace has her AoE stun for 100% with no conditions. Elizabeth also has an AoE stun, but it's only on enemies whose beneficial effects she removes. But the fact that she removes AoE beneficial effects and blocks them for 2 turns is very good, especially in the Arena. And that's mostly what she does. She has the 100% action gauge absorption when she removes a beneficial effect on this A1. But the way I see it, she's probably going to use her AoE first, and then they're not going to have any beneficial effects, and they won't have them for 2 more turns. So I kind of saw the usefulness of this kind of going down because of that. So she's pretty much just known for this A3, but I think that because Grace exists and can do this without any conditions, and because Elizabeth is more of a PvP focus, I think that makes her the S plus tier. I do think that, again, she can belong in the SS tier. She can do very good for your team, especially in the later game when you start fighting harder and harder waves that are putting up a lot of beneficial effects. And last in the S plus tier is Arhard, who I would say is probably the best primary tank that does regular tank stuff. So he puts up threat for 3 turns, counterattack for 3 turns, or 3 cycles, however you want to call it, because it's not actually turns. Increase defense, and heals himself. This is pretty much what I look for out of a tank. You want them to have threat, you want them to increase their defense, you want them to heal themselves so they stay alive, so they're taking... Yeah, I mean, that's what you want, right? You want them to stay alive, and you want them to get the damage coming towards them. This is pretty cool. On his A2, he makes himself invincible for 1 turn. So if he puts up threat and then gets around to his A2 fast enough, he'll be invincible for these hits that end up coming in from the threat. So that's pretty cool. And then his A1 also has a 75% chance to heal him some more. So as just a straight up tank doing tank stuff, I think that he's probably the best regular soak up damage tank, whereas Grace is probably the best utility tank because she's got that AoE stun, which is just insane. So you can see why Arhard was a little bit below Grace, because he just doesn't have as much utility, but in terms of just straight up tanks, I think Arhard is very good. And now we're on to the regular S tier. The first one is Crystal. I actually think that she can be pretty good now, but I've never had a chance to build her out and try her. So she's essentially just a really fast single target tank. So she freezes right here, and then she does extra damage when the targets have a weaken effect, which this used to be extra damage when they were frozen, which was kind of a bummer because she only freezes one person for one turn. But now that this is just when they have weaken effects, it's really nice because it's not reliant on her A2. She also has this absorb action gauge 100% chance, which is nice. On her A1, she increases her attack speed by 20%. Increases her attack speed for 2 turns on her A2. And then her passive, every 3 turns, essentially, she's going to get a full extra turn. So, I mean, between this 100% absorb action gauge and this extra turn, you can have this down to like a 1 turn cooldown, essentially, which is pretty crazy. So I am quite curious to try her out and see how fast you can really get her going in this cycle and see how good she does. Because I don't think that she has a bunch of damage built into her kit, but you can get her going fast enough that she can get that damage going just over time. Next, we have Karma. Karma is kind of a split one for me. I really do like his kit, but I just found, so his A3 is what his big move is. He increases damage, provides a shield, and a counter attack for 2 turns. The thing that I didn't care for with him was that I found counterattack to be pretty lackluster. It sounds great on paper to have an AoE counterattack on your team, but it doesn't seem to play out as well as I thought it would. So you get a slight increase to damage and a small shield. He does have a 100% chance to freeze and decreases their action gauge, which is pretty cool. But if you compare him to someone like the Dyke, someone like Dyke, right? He provides a shield as well, increased damage, and increases crit rate, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is a 40% increase to crit rate, which is a lot. And then heals all allies, so she's just like more of a healer, right? So Karma has a little bit more control built in with the freeze. But yeah, I mean, I feel like maybe if his kit had a heal in here somewhere, I think he would be a lot better. So I think he's good. I just felt like his kit was missing a little bit of something. I'm guessing that they're counting this freeze and decrease action gauge to be a pretty big skill of his, but it's kind of just meh in my opinion. I mean, it's good, don't get me wrong, but you know, I think that Dyke does a little bit better in this case. All right, we're on to Reinhardt. So Reinhardt is a decent tank as well. He puts up threat, he has an increased defense, puts up cohesion, which is kind of a weird buff. It's not super helpful, to be honest. This passive is pretty useless. By the time my enemies or my allies start to die, I don't care what my tank is doing. My tank should be taking it up before my allies die. And he does have AoE silence for 1 turn, which is pretty cool. It just silence makes it so they can only use their A1. So the reason he's down this low is because you could have someone like Grace that does AoE stun, where they just don't even get a turn. Not only can they not use their A1, but they don't even get a turn. So I think that he can be pretty good, but he's not as good as someone like Grace. All right, Julia. So Julia is a dealer. She just, you know what, her kit just really didn't stand out to me. Like, she doesn't do anything unique. She does a little bit of damage on max HP, but that falls off as time goes on because it has a maximum amount. So the further you get in the game, the less percentage of their health this is. So that really bummed me out from her immediately. She does do the extra damage as they lose HP like Kurt. So I guess she's all single target. I guess she's kind of like Kurt pretty much, except she deals some extra damage from enemy max HP too. So maybe it's not the end of the world. I mean, if her raw damage numbers are good, plus she's doing that additional damage from enemy max HP, maybe she'll be good. But she also has a lot of stuff that increases her action gauge and whatnot if the enemy's HP is below 50, which is pretty conditional. So yeah, I've never got a chance to try her out. I think that she can be decent, but I think that there's other people that do her job better in terms of dealers. All right, Jade is pretty quick. Her main thing is that she self-buffs and increases a bunch of her stats here. And then she gains 3 stacks of Beast Stack, and that makes her A1 do confirmed critical hits, and that's all she does. So she buffs herself, gives herself confirmed critical hits, and then goes and does her critical hits. I think that it's a really cool kit in my opinion, but I've tried her out a little bit on one of my alts, and she just doesn't seem to do the damage that you would expect out of her. So yeah, I mean, she doesn't have an AoE. It's cool that she has confirmed critical hits, so you don't have to build crit, especially early game. But as you get later in the game, you're gonna have stats that you have to put on, and you'll end up with some crit rate anyways. So this kind of falls off in the later game when you're already needing to build some crit anyways, because there's a confirmed stat for that. So next in the S tier, the last one in the S tier, we have Arya. Arya's kind of a mixed bag for me. I did like her a lot in the early game because she has AoE and she does do a little bit of damage. And I do like the decreased damage perk. So she does a decreased damage debuff on an AoE, which is nice. It's a 20% decrease in their enemy's damage. She also has a 100% absorb action gauge, which is nice. So she can get around to her turns a little bit quicker. And her A1's kind of nothing special. So pretty much she's just there for her decreased damage, and she does a little bit of damage herself, but not a ton. So she's good, but she just doesn't provide enough in my opinion. I feel like she could do a little bit more, whether it's probably some other sort of debuff. I think that she needs maybe another debuff on her AoE, or some sort of really good debuff on one of her single target ones. I think that would make her more usable. All right, on to the A's real quick. I'm not going to go too into detail with them since they're in the A tier, but Kayn has a decreased defense and unrecoverable on all enemies. It's actually pretty good, but unrecoverable is pretty limited to is it up when they try to heal. And decreased defense I've found to have pretty minimal effect, and there actually are other decreased defense champions that decrease defense further than he does. And that's pretty much all he does. So yeah, he heals himself a little bit every turn, which is nice, helps keep him alive, but he's pretty much just known for the one skill, and it's not the best skill in the game. Next we have Heinz. Heinz is a tanker. He does a single target taunt for 2 turns. It's the only 2-turn taunt that I think I've seen so far. But yeah, he just doesn't have any particular tanky stuff that really helps him out. Yeah, he has the taunt for 2 turns on someone, but it's on a 3-turn cooldown. And then he does increase his own defense and reflect. He gives himself a shield here, increases his action gauge a little bit here. So I mean, I think that the main thing for me was he didn't have enough threat or healing to really keep himself going. If he had a small heal somewhere in here, I think that would be nice. All he does is gives himself this little shield. I mean, it's a decent shield, actually, magic 120, but it's also not based on HP, which is not what you want on a tank. You would prefer it based on HP so that you can stack HP on them, make them really strong. So his kit was just a little bit mismatched to me, in my opinion. Next is Diele. I don't know how you pronounce this. Diele? I pronounce it Diele. I like to put some emphasis on that last E. She is a debuffer. Sorry, I almost said dealer. So her thing is she does AoE skill cooldowns for 1 turn, which you can think of this similar to Silence, right? This essentially makes it so they're going to use their A1 for 1 turn. But when people like Grace exist where they can stun for a whole turn, this is not as good. And then she has a single target shield destroy. I will say that's probably one of her uses, is if you're fighting a single target enemy like a boss that has shield destroy, she has that. But there's other people that have it too, so yeah, I mean, that's really all there is to say about her. There's nothing super great about her kit. And last, and I suppose least, since these are the A tiers, we have Elsa, who is a supporter. The thing I didn't like about her, she has a really strong single target heal, 50% of her HP, which is quite a bit. But I think AoE heals are significantly better. So this was kind of lost on me. And then she's got a freeze, increases her own defense when you freeze, and instant heals herself on the freeze. So, you know, she's got a little bit of healing, but she's very selfish with her stuff, I guess is probably the easiest way to put it. She doesn't heal the team. She just heals she heals one person. And she might even use that on herself if she's being targeted. So I think there's many better healers than her, in my opinion. Probably, well, there definitely are better healers in the SR tier rarity, even more so than the SSR tier. So yeah, that's it. Let me pull the tier list back up for you guys. So there we are. That's all of the heroes in my SSR tier list. I hope that gave you guys some decent background information of like why I chose who I chose and helps you understand the SSRs a little bit better. I really enjoyed making the tier list. It actually is a little bit stressful trying to make decisions like that because you know that certain people are going to disagree with you, but I'm excited about it. I just turned it into excitement because I want to discuss this. I want to find out if there's somebody that's really good that I'm sleeping on. I want to know about it. Or if there's somebody that I ranked as good, I don't want people investing into that person and then they end up not being good. So please let me know if you guys have any information on who's good, who's not good. If you guys want to give any input, I am totally open to it and I will revise the tier list as needed. I'm working on an SR tier list right now as well. That's going to take me a little while because there's a lot of SRs. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do it. I might divide it up into like tanks, dealers, debuffers. I'm not sure exactly yet, but I'll try and get that out to you guys as soon as possible. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you found it useful. Remember, there's a link to my tier list down below. Make sure you check out my video from yesterday talking about the update changes as well as the balance changes to the heroes because a lot of these heroes just got rebalanced. If you want to see that, go check out my video from yesterday about the 1.12.0 update. If you enjoyed, leave a like, please. It really helps me out. My account's pretty young, so any likes really help me out. And if you really enjoy my content and you want to follow me up, make sure you leave a sub. And until next time, enjoy the tier list and keep on grinding. Peace out.